Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Topic Tuesday. We have a wonderful session for you with presenter Mary Reaves from Beginnings SC. And what we will be talking about is childcare centers and the training for childcare centers, the why, the how to request, and the benefit to family and provider. And I can't tell you how much this has been a beneficial session for me as a parent, family with beginnings that Mary and Kara has had and given me support during the childcare days. And so this is a great resource, and I appreciate Mary with Beginnings, the director of programs, and all that she does in the community, doing the Language to Thrivation Task Force, just so much in different facets to give us this information. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Very excited to be here. And one thing that I love is one of the tools that I am going to show you all tonight is something we actually got from Jocelyn. We are always learning, and our parents are teaching us all along the way. I love that it's a very collaborative relationship, and I think this is a good example. All right, so I have some slides here that I am going to share with you all and walk us through what we're doing. So I started it with this graphic because this is really what we believe at Beginnings. That is not deaf that disables a child. It's access to communication. And that starts literally from day one, right? And childcare is often one of those parts of early days that we just don't think a whole lot about. I'm a mom of 3, certainly spent a lot of time choosing the right childcare. And there were so many things to consider. And when we're working with our parents that have a deaf or hard of hearing child, one of the things that sometimes gets left out when we're thinking about childcare is, what if they don't know what to do? How do I teach them? How do we do that? So this, I think, just kind of speaks to why we're doing what we do. So I'm going to start with this one. As a DSS, which is Department of Social Services partner agency, and that is one of the programs that we have at Beginnings where we provide hearing screenings to child care centers. But another huge part of that is providing training. And you'll see here on the slide, it says Endeavors approved. What does that even mean? Endeavors is the training program that all licensed childcare programs are required to be enrolled in. It's kind of like, for many of us and whatever our career path is, we often need, professional development or continuing education, and childcare staff are the same. And the program that we use in South Carolina is Endeavors. And so we have Endeavors approved trainings. We have 3, soon to be 4 staff who are approved Endeavors trainers. And that means we can go into childcare programs and they get credit for it. And that's something that a lot of parents don't know, that if you have a child in childcare, these programs are required to get these training hours, and we can do that. And that's totally free. We'll come do that at any time. And so this is a flyer that your parent education specialist can give you so that you can pass this on to your childcare center. And then we have some more that are a little more childcare focused with the specific information that they might want to know about those Endeavors trainings. Another thing that we can provide them is technical assistance. What does that mean? That means, and they call it TA. Basically, that means we go in and they tell us what one of their struggles is, and we help answer questions. Trying to think of some examples from some kiddos we've had. One of she's no longer in childcare. She's now in 2nd grade. One of our kiddos was in a childcare program, and it was this really open concept childcare, right? So they had half walls. Not a lot of rugs because there are a lot of restrictions that childcare programs have to do. And sometimes it's just simpler for them to just kind of bare bones it. That's really problematic for our kids often. And this little girl was just constantly taking her hearing aids off. And she had had hearing aids since she was 3 months old. So it wasn't that she didn't like them anymore. It was that it was absolutely a chaotic listening environment. So, mom was talking to me and what do we do? She's just refusing to wear hearing aids. And I said, well, let's just go on site and take a look. And the first thing I noticed when I walked in was this open environment, super loud, chairs scraping everywhere, kids playing with blocks. And I went immediately, okay, I think I know what the issue might be. And so we worked with a childcare program to, bring in some materials that they could put tennis balls in the bottoms of their chairs. Instead of covering some of their boards in paper, could they do some in fabric and bring bean bags in all the ways that they could? And a lot of programs are very willing to do those things if they know how and if they know that they're helpful. So this is a flyer. So it's just a couple of things that we can do for childcare. All right, this is, and what I did was just kind of bring a bunch of examples of, trying to move this thing out of my screen. Sorry, y'all. Of information that we have, tools and resources that are at your disposal. You can get from your parent education specialist at any time. If you don't currently have a parent education specialist, these are things you could call and be like, hey, I saw this on the webinar. Is this something that you could send me? Absolutely. Information about my child. Sometimes when we're sitting down and prepping for starting childcare or transitioning to a new program, it helps for families to talk about and think through things like this. What am I concerned about? What does my child do well? What are the things I would like to be able to be involved in my the childcare program? I want to be able to volunteer. Do they have story time? Can I come and do that? My child likes XYZ. My child doesn't like. My child learns more easily. The reason that this is important is because to be a good advocate for our kids, we have to know our kids, right? And obviously we know our children. We are the experts in our children. But I'm sure that many of you are like me in that we get to a meeting where we're talking with a team of people about our very unique kiddo. And all of a sudden we can't think of lots of the things that we want to be able to think about. And so thinking through this process ahead of time can be really helpful. Knowing immediately my child likes this, it doesn't work well when this happens. Thinking back to our little kiddo in the daycare, if it's after story time and particularly detailed listening time, and then there's circle time and it's all, or center time and it's all chaos, and everyone's having to, listen to blocks banging and chairs moving, I might know that my kid is kind of a sensory kid. And so that might be a time I can warn them. So this might be a good time she needs a listening break, right? So knowing our kid and writing out what we know is really helpful in helping us figure out how to be a good advocate. Okay, something else that we put together that I love, and I'm sorry I moved this down so you cannot see where I got this from. But I got this from an Usher Syndrome website that I just thought was fantastic. And we have another template here that you can get and make your own. You obviously could, take this concept and run with it and change it and do it however you want to. But I love this because this is a quick something that you give to your childcare. And obviously this one says in elementary school, but you could use this starting at 6 months. You could use this starting at 6 weeks. Are we going to have as many maybe M's of max for our 6-week-old? I mean, maybe it's a whole lot of like sleeping, definitely doesn't like wet diapers, right? Those kinds of things. But this is a really simple way to have information that you give to everybody. And so they don't have questions, or they don't have as many questions. And when they do have questions, they know who to call. Because one of the things that we continue to run into, and I'm sure that any of you that, have kids with hearing loss really of any age, is that people get nervous about the technology. They know it's very expensive. They know it has small, tiny parts. They don't really know what it's for. Like maybe they know someone, grandmother or grandfather who wears one, and they, are more easy to get along with, and they watch TV. But for a lot of people, that's kind of the extent of the knowledge that they have, right? So what we find is that a lot of times parents will drop their kids off in daycare. They're thinking the hearing aids are on, because they're like, put them on, or their cochlear implant is on. And then we might not find out until the next audiology appointment that the hours are ridiculously low per day. And sometimes, if we come back to childcare program, they're like, well, they pulled it out and I was worried they would put it in their mouth, and they put it up on the shelf. So heading those things off at the pass, making sure they know they're going to pull it off. We got to put it back on. It is really expensive, but we have insurance. We can take care of it. So having some information like this that you can give to everybody in the center is really helpful. And the centers that we've worked with, they really appreciate it. They really do. All right, so here's the blank that you can get. So when I was thinking about really the why and the how, I pulled up this document that we have, Mistakes People Make, Parents. And I know we don't like to think about the mistakes that we make, because if you're like me, probably beat ourselves up and think that we make way more mistakes than we can even count. And, this whole parenting journey is just wild. And so many times we can mess our kids up. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to point out for this one. So this one is obviously for a little bit older kids. This is a special education guide. This is really looking more at the IEP process, the individualized education program. This is sometimes getting into the things where situations maybe are a little bit tumultuous. But I did want to point out number 2 specifically. It's talking about the opposite mistake. Number 1 being going in and you're thinking of it as it's adversarial already. I have yet to encounter very many parents of daycare age kids that start their daycare journey like that, right? But what I have found, and I talked about this just a minute ago, is that sometimes, not that we'll put too much trust in them, because obviously it's important that we put a lot of trust into the people who are spending all day with our teeny tiny humans who can't yet, most of them, tell us what happened. But it's really important to don't assume they know. And again, I mentioned that telling them everything, thinking about all the things that they might need to know, and not being afraid to make a list of those items, give them Max's cheat sheet, do whatever. In a minute, I'm going to get to the beautiful tool that Jocelyn taught us. But I think sharing that, sometimes, and I absolutely have been guilty of this. I'm like, well, we'll just kind of see. I'll just see how it goes. It'll probably be okay. They probably know. One of the things that's really important in being a strong advocate is just going ahead and making sure that we say the important things and not feeling like we're stepping on toes, because we're not. Most of the time people want to know, right? They want to know how to get it right. Humans don't like to mess up. They don't like to guess and mess up. And so when we're given the information, everybody wins. I think that's really the one that I wanted to highlight on that one. Again, this is a tool and a resource I'm happy to share with anybody. Okay. this is another tool, and I talked about, us being the experts on our kids, but sometimes we might still be in that role of learning about our child's disability, though we're not really sure how to talk to people about it. So I think this is another really good skill when we're getting ready to go to childcare, if we're transitioning to childcare, if we're struggling in our childcare setting. Being able to talk about our kids' hearing loss is really important. And so we have some really great tools to help you do that. And again, this is one of those, my middle son, has several disabilities, and I will never forget sitting down to do an assessment that asked me all kinds of things like this. The innate strengths my child has. That question stumped me. And I remember feeling like if someone had asked me this in the middle of a meeting, I wouldn't have, it had just been like flabbergasted, because obviously he has millions of innate strengths, but I couldn't recall them then. And so sitting down to think about these things gave me all the tools and the language that I need to, when I'm sitting in meetings and I'm advocating for my child, I've got this list ready to go because I've taken the time to sit and think about it. Another thing that we encounter, excuse me, is being able to describe our hearing loss. We meet parents all the time who are given this audiogram, the graph with all the X's and O's, and they have a general idea of what their child's hearing loss is and how to describe it, but maybe not enough to explain it to someone else. And that's really important. So familiarizing yourself with that and being able to explain to other people what that means is an important part of that advocacy. I talked to a mom the other day who was like, well, she does have a moderate hearing loss. But she came in the room the other day and didn't have her hearing aids on, and she heard everything we were talking about. She has selective hearing. I said, well, maybe. But, this kind of let me know that maybe I need to do a little bit more education about what does a moderate hearing loss mean, so that I can relay that further to, or help mom relay that further to the team in the childcare program, because this kiddo's in childcare. So we've just got a couple of other things, degree of hearing loss. And this has several other pages to it that I didn't really want to put all of those here. But sometimes finding a formal way to write down, and think through how we're going to talk about other people really helps us get there. And so this is just another tool that I wanted to make sure I could share with you. All right, being mindful of our time here. I want to make sure there's time for questions. This is another one that is just helpful tips. Again, this is, something that we might give more for school age students, but this is still important for our little people. A 2-year-old who is in a very busy classroom and maybe has a cochlear implant, if they're going to do circle time at the end of the day, he might be checking out. Listening fatigue, doesn't just happen for our 3rd and 4th graders. It can also happen for our little people. They can get tired of the intensity of sound because they are still learning how to listen. They're learning how to navigate their environment. They're learning how to tune out those sounds that they don't need, right? And so they can get overwhelmed. Helping our programs use hands-on experiential learning. Most of them are doing that, but sometimes a good reminder that, hey, my child is in your class. Sometimes listening is difficult. The more opportunities for hands-on, the better. They're just a couple of these, lots of visuals, and reminding them. And sometimes, we'll have to say this. We'll meet a daycare and they're like, oh yeah, I had a deaf kid one time. Oh, that's really great. That might not be the same experience that you have with this child. So, the more that you can say, here are some very specific things about my child and how their hearing loss impacts them, can really help highlight the uniqueness of every hearing loss. I'm sure y'all have heard the term, zebras. Like a zebra, every zebra has a different set of stripes. If you've met one deaf kid, you've met one deaf kid. The situations. I don't know if y'all can't see my little cursor, can you? Thinking about access in different situations. So thinking through different things that might happen at daycare. Feeding time, outside time, circle time. Do they do movies at the end of the day? That's happens less and less. But there are still some daycare programs who might put on the TV at the end of the day. If they don't have captions on, if your child's not used to captions, if they're sitting in the back of the class and then the daycare center calls you and they're like, every time we turn on the TV, they're just back there, fussing and hollering. They need a little bit of education on why that's not accessible or enjoyable for your child and what they can do differently, right? Because the thing that we really want to avoid, obviously, we want to make sure that they are fully included, that they have access all the time, that they are learning and growing and feeling loved and developing. But on the other side of that, we want to make sure we avoid as quickly and as early as we can any of those situations where we're going to have behavioral difficulties. Because what a child care is often going to see is just misbehavior, right? Well, maybe this isn't the right environment. No. The accessibility, the inclusion, the situation is not correct, and we can help you fix that. But we can't do that if we aren't having conversations and if we don't really know, right? If we're not asking questions and getting in there and having conversations. I could have sworn that my next slide was Jocelyn's beautiful PowerPoint. Oh, no. Nope. I needed to open up in a different one. Okay, if I have time to do that, I'm going to roll through that really quick. This is another great thing that can be another great tool, resource that Lisa actually developed for us. I love it. It's beautiful. That you give to your daycare center. Sometimes they just need some extra tips and tricks, things that we can do. If, they're like, well, they have selective hearing or they're not paying attention. Sometimes they just need some tips and tricks, right? These are not, more great resources that you can give to them so they can make sure that they are including, if your child is using listening and spoken language, or if they're signing, or if they're cueing, providing some of those resources and ways to do it. Because again, I really can't think of any situations where I've met anybody in the last, roughly 20 years of doing this that does not want to do a good job, that does not want to get it right, that is not in this field for any reason other than they love children and they want to see them grow and thrive. But so often, again, what we find is people just don't know, or they don't know what they don't know. Okay, this is my last little resource sheet here, 5 steps to becoming your child's best advocate. This is another one that's really kind of, focusing more on the IEP. But my belief is the earlier we learn how to be advocates, the easier it is when we get to the really complicated stuff with special education and, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. If we have already started out with this assumption that we're an equal partner, then we're ahead of the game. Number 2 kind of highlights what we were talking about a minute ago, that sometimes getting to the part of being able to talk about our child's hearing loss, our child's disability, that's a process that looks very different for each parent. My process getting to talk about Oliver's disabilities was a process for me. It was mine. And there are a lot of perceptions and feelings that come along with that, just like this. So recognizing and addressing those helps us be a better advocate. Never stop learning. And that's one of the reasons we're so glad that you are involved with us here at Beginnings. And hopefully have a parent education specialist, because our job and our goal is to never stop learning and to give you information, and we learn from you every time. So improving your skills every time you meet a new teacher and give a new presentation or give a new training or roll down the list of all the ways that your child is amazing and all the ways that you are looking forward to this childcare center meeting the unique needs of your child in a way that's actually going to be pretty easy for them. The more we do that, the better we get. And the last one is participate. Just like for our school age kids, just like for all the processes that we are doing with our kids, we know that we don't go to a therapy session for 30 minutes a week, and that is all the work we have to do, right? We're coming home, we have to do all the therapies, we have to live that life. And the same is true for getting involved in our childcare. And it is not easy. I know a lot of times we are running out the door, we're dropping them off at 7:30, we're hightailing it to work, we're doing our full day of work, we're taking care of all the things that we have to do for our jobs and to pay our bills and hopefully feed our souls a little. And then we, race home, probably through traffic, pick our kid up. Bye. Great. See you tomorrow. Did they have 5 wet diapers? How many bottles did they drink? All those things before we, hop back in our car, very possibly to a cranky kid, get home and have to do all the things that happen then. Participating in childcare can be hard. Participating in elementary school can be hard, but the earlier we get into the process, into the habit of doing that, of taking just 2 minutes to check in. Hey, were there any issues with hearing aids on today? How was wear time? How did circle time go? Did you notice that them, did you notice Lisa sitting next to you on the floor, closer to you? Was she more engaged in circle time today? Oh, that's great. 1-2 minutes to do a quick check-in, to highlight some of those tools and the tips and tricks that you've already talked to them about. Being a participant and a partner in that really goes a long way. Staying invested. Because again, the worst thing, maybe not the worst thing, but it's very frustrating, I know, for a lot of parents to find out, 2-3 months later at that audiology appointment or that CI mapping that it's not being worn when we think it's being worn. So that is what I have for you. I went, just 3 minutes over my time. So I think I'm not too bad. I really want to give a quick little example of Jocelyn's, the PowerPoint presentation that we developed. I'm sorry, I can't do 2 things at one time. Do I have a minute to do that?
Yes, please. And while you're finding that, this is Jocelyn. I'm going to make a couple of comments because it was an awesome presentation and it brings home some good thoughts that I think when you find the presentation from me years ago, because my daughter's 13 now, and what you just mentioned about participating. And I just want to put a plug that's so important. Why parents should get involved with Hands and Voices and Beginnings, because we learn from each other. Like you just described that hectic day, use other families to be a tool and a resource. Something a parent did 13 years ago can revamp into new guidance for a newer parent. And then it grows, because I've seen parents since then say, okay, I give them all of this information and I do maybe a demonstration of what hearing loss is. Like I've heard people say they put the little the cotton balls in the ear to kind of simulate or show simulation videos. So you work smarter and not harder by being involved and using these tools, because they have been vetted and have improved other situations. So
yeah,
I'll let you pull that up.
Thank you for adding that in, Jocelyn. I appreciate that. And so much of what we have, the tools that we have been created because parents have said, I need this, or, hey, I did this and it worked really well. So, again, our parents navigating this journey are the experts. So this is the presentation. It looks a little bit different than yours, Jocelyn. We branded it, and I think I've shown it to you before. We love putting a picture of stuff. If you have pictures of your kids, put your pictures in there. We talk about, why we're doing this. I love the videos. This is when you might want to do a simulation, but this is also this teaching audiogram here. Hopefully you all know what a teaching audiogram is and are familiar with that and have blanks so your audiologist can fill it out for you. But, we've got this down here. I can't move it. The red zeros, we'll, plot it out. This is a template that we have created so that anybody can use this. If you want it, you let me know. I will email it to you. It will have all the blanks. You make it yours. But plotting that audiogram and teaching it to them. Talking about, if they were hearing aids, going through all these things. And I think, Jocelyn, you did this kind of as a formal presentation for your childcare team, right? I know, you mentioned that was a long time ago, but.
Right. As an introduction to let them know, because again, if I'm as a new parent know that over 95% of the families have no prior experience with hearing loss, then it's likely my child care provider wouldn't either. And it also helps me communicate and learn what my child needed and organize it. But yeah, as an introduction and you meet and greet, do that. And I've done that all the way up through IEPs. And now we've turned that over to Alyssa to do with her intro.
Which I love. I love seeing Alyssa just be such an amazing teacher and advocate for other people. She's incredible. So this, you can make this as big or as little as you want. I've done some trainings for childcare programs about my kiddo before, and I'm not going to lie. Sometimes walking in, and these are people I've known, but everybody's sitting there and it's after hours and they're kind of like this, like, why do I have to be here? Well, I thank them for coming and I tell them how important it is and how much I appreciate that they love my child so much that they're there. And I hope that I give them new information. And I use that opportunity to, give them the information I hope that they will take and learn. So we've got a hearing aids information page. If your child has cochlear implants, we've got that. Some visuals on the listening bubble, because for our kids that use technology, we know the listening bubble is critical. I do not want them putting, my kiddo with technology who doesn't have FM or DM equipment in the back of the room. So this is a good visual for them. And I'm kind of flying through this. How to communicate. We've got tips in here. How to care for hearing aids, because there's that part. What I want to say is please don't just take them out and put them on a shelf. If you don't know how to use them, let's talk about it. I'll give you the tips and tricks. When not to use them, how to care for them, how to store them. Same thing for, your child uses cochlear implants. What do we do with those? How do we care for them? Takes a village, reminding them that, you're thankful that they're there and you need their help. And some videos and resources, how to change batteries. And I love that, we don't need that to play for us. I love that, this is something you can actually give to the center director and they can have as a resource if they need to go back and look at it. If child wears Bajas, and that is it. We do have a couple of other resources for kiddos who are visual communicators. They use American Sign Language. So we have some other tips and tricks for that. So I know that was really quick, flying through that presentation, but I just kind of wanted to give you one more example that there are a lot of ways that you can share this information with your childcare team. There's no one right way. It's really whatever way works better for you. The most important part is sharing it and knowing what information you need to relay to that team. Okay, 7:40. That was a lot. I know we want to save time for some questions, so I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a wealth of information. And the guidance and all of the handouts. I'm glad that parents are able to get that information from you. And I like the tip of what you said with giving the attaboys to the child care center too, to build that relationship. And like you said, the hearing aids with technology now are able to track how often the devices are on. And when having conversations with the center, I said, if you're logging what they're eating and how much they're pooping, you can write on the back of my slip how often they had their hearing aid in. And that was a conversation piece, and it kept it in the forefront of their mind. Do you have a recommendation of how you should do the follow-up? You do the little mini ones here and there during the week, but at the child care center, do you get into those more formal talks of asking to follow up like 6 months after being there, or any duration?
So, our kids often will change classes, and I will be very honest. I think everybody's probably aware COVID has had a big burden on childcare programs. So many of them are short-staffed. Part of what we do with DSS is the hearing screenings and training and technical assistance. And one of the things that I continue to hear from childcare programs is that they can't find staff. So what that means for our kids is there might be high turnover, right? Or they might have this person swapping into this classroom or covering this classroom. So I really think, if we go back to that being a participant part, those regular check-ins, I think, are really important. And making sure that there's information available. I love Max's cheat sheet. Maybe that just gets tacked up on the board. Every classroom I've ever been in has a bulletin board for parents and for staff. They've got all kinds of things taped up on the wall. Adding that up there and checking in and making sure. So I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend any specific timeline. I think it's going to depend on the center and the staff that you have. But that's really the part of being a participant and making sure that you are being seen and that you're, and I guess, how do I want to say this? I don't know, making it so that they feel comfortable enough to ask you. I think when you're establishing that relationship, we can kind of go into things a couple of different ways. Again, I'm a mama, so I'm going to talk to you with my mama hat on. There have definitely been times I have been annoyed that they're not doing what I already asked them to do. And if I show up into a classroom and I'm already ready for an excuse or them to tell me they didn't do it or whatever, I'm not going to set off the tone of I'm approachable and they can ask me something that I probably already told them, but they're not really sure and they're kind of uncomfortable. And sometimes that's not an easy way to be, right? To maintain that status of, you can ask me and I won't bite your head off. So I think that's an important part of that also. So being a participant, regularly checking in, and being someone that they're not afraid to ask a question too. And again, guilty, been there. So it's a conscious, ongoing effort that we have to do.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I'll look in the chat if anybody else. Lisa, did you have any follow-up?
Well, yeah. So, Mary, this is Lisa. And I just wanted to ask, so for families that are not involved with Beginning South Carolina and have a parent educator, are they eligible to have the Endeavors training at their children's childcare center?
Oh,
Do
yeah.
they need to? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. Thank you, Lisa, for asking that. Probably one of the best ways they can do that is talk to their childcare center, let them know that they have, and they can, if they want to just contact us, we can get them one of the flyers they can give to the childcare and say, hey, there's this training. You're going to get credit for it. I think it would really be beneficial for my child. Sometimes childcare will just, take that and roll with it. Most of the time they're looking for training hours, especially training hours that are free. Training that is flexible. We'll provide it anytime. We will do virtual or in person. We'll do evenings, we'll do Saturdays. And a lot of times childcare programs have a hard time finding flexible training opportunities. And so we try to make sure that we are that. If they've done that and their childcare is really not biting, they haven't been taking the opportunity yet, they can always reach out to us and say, hey, would you be willing to call this childcare center and offer a training? And we will totally do that. Absolutely.
This is Jocelyn. We have a question in chat from Lisa White, and she says, I'm an SLP and found this very helpful and user-friendly. A couple of questions. Do you have an end of the day summary for childcare centers to complete that explains time child didn't wear a device, like nap time, etc., or behaviors the child may have displayed, talking too loudly, pulling at ears, wincing where there were loud noises, etc.? And then the second part is, do you teach workers how to complete the Lang sound test?
First off, hi, Lisa. Those are excellent questions. And no to both of those. But I can feel like I can pretty safely already see the gears in Lisa Jolly's brain turning. Number one, I love that idea. I think that's an incredible resource that we do need to create and have to childcares. And we have looked at some language plan, a tool that our team found when they were recently at the EHDI conference. And so I think that we can absolutely create something like that. I love that. I think it would be really helpful for childcare workers to be able to think, oh, wait, I did see that. And obviously, we're more inclined to think specifically about things if we have a guide to do that. So I love that idea. Thank you, Lisa. And no, the Ling sounds, and I think that's another area where we could do that. I'm not really sure how, because again, coming from the realm of not SLPs and no one in our staff, I think that's something because I don't know where to think about that. I appreciate you giving us good ideas and things that we can continue to do to support our families and to support the childcare staff.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. But yeah, I definitely see number one being helpful. And like I said, the centers usually write, how the kid did during the day. But as you communicate for your child, you could say, these would be helpful for me to know about my child, because some of that stuff with the noise or the wincing, maybe the program needs to change. I know, the center was nervous when my child went down or you got close because it would whistle and stuff. So that's good communication. And then as far as the Ling 6, I do hope the parents are still doing that at home frequently as well. Because like you said, the turnover at the centers can be high. That would be a little bit more difficult, but please, parents, check the devices and do the Ling 6 at home for your kiddos for sure. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Well, that is awesome. Well, it is 7:50. I don't see any other questions, but if you have this and if people who listen to the recording later have any questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with Beginnings SC for information. Like you said, it takes a community. We're all in this. We want our children to do well and succeed, and get involved, participate, and you'll learn a lot. And you'll also be surprised how much you can offer other people. Your experiences are unique and different, and some are the same, but you don't know what you don't know. And everybody has suggestions. So join us along the journey. Join and connect with Beginnings SC if you haven't already. Joined with Hands and Voices. We have tons of mingles coming up. So check both of our Facebook pages for things to come, including the Wind Down dinner, the end of April. Have all the tickets sold out?
No, April 29th. Thank you for plugging that. Okay. Tickets have not sold out, so get yours now. Y'all come hang out.
Yeah, they usually do fast. So I was one of the first few that registered, especially since they had a quick early bird special. I was like, oh, I got to get it. It's always a good event, and to get information with Beginnings and support them. Like I said, connect with us. We have mingles coming up, skate party, virtual paint and sit this Sunday. We have book clubs going on for the kiddos, and that's virtual. It's good to see other kids. It's good to talk to other parents. We have a parent book club, spotlights, so much. You're not alone in this journey, and you won't regret joining with us and continuing that partnership. So thank you from Hands and Voices and Beginnings SC, and stay connected with us. Until next time. Bye-bye.